everyone. Welcome to tonight's Titan Leader Talk. We're excited to have our next guest on. As usual, you can always get more leadership content and leadership ideas and things from the Titan Leader app. We're excited to share our next guest with you, especially with the WNBA Draft coming up this evening. It's definitely a big day for women's sports. I think you can rank our next guest with some of the greatest in women's sports who have broke the glass ceiling and really done some amazing things as athletes and as a coach. I'm going to kick it over to another Titan Leader member, Charles Buchanan, to get us started.
Good morning, everybody. So Katie Smith is a living legend, one of the best. Starting off, she's the Naismith Hall of Famer, 3-time gold medalist, 2-time American Basketball League champion. The only 2 years that league was in existence. So that is a pretty cool accolade. 2-time Women's National Basketball Association champion. In one of those years was the NBA Finals MVP. 2-time All WNBA First Team, 7-time WNBA All-Star, the WNBA Scoring Champion, a part of the WNBA All-Decade Team, 7,885 points for professional career points, 2-time Big Ten Player of the Year, Ohio State Varsity Hall of Famer, Gatorade National Player of the Year in high school, and a high school All-American. So that is an incredible list of accolades throughout a career. It's just amazing to be able to have the opportunity to talk to you today about leadership, character, culture, all of those things. In addition to that, your playing days, you've also have 6 years now as a coach in the WNBA. So going from athlete to coach at a high level is a lot of fun. So with all that being said, how would you describe yourself as a leader?
Wow. So it's kind of hard, right? When I guess as a player, I remember when I first started playing, it just wasn't part of what I thought of, right? You were just kind of doing your job. But I think some of the things that helped me, first of all, have success, and then I think I grew into a leader. I think it's in you, and then somewhat you have to kind of form it a little bit. So for me, I think it's, first of all, it's hard work, right? At the end of the day, you have to put in the work to be good at anything. You have to put in the work to have relationships. You have to, put in the work on everything. The other part, I think, is the consistency at which you do it, both from your work ethic and your performance, but also from a personality piece. I don't think there's a lot of leaders that are high one day, low next day, coming in, and you don't know what they're going to be like, right? I think there's somebody you can count on. So I think the consistency piece is something that, for me, I've kind of always had. I'm going to show up, good, bad, whatever the day is. I'm going to continue to show up and do my job as well as I possibly can in all the circumstances. Another part of being prepared. You're prepared for the situation. You're prepared for the task at hand. You're prepared for the others that you're leading, both as a coach and if you're a starter on your team. And I think you're also a learner, a lifelong learner, that people say, like, you don't know it all. We have moments where we think we know it all, and the coach may say something to you, or a boss says something to you, or like you huff and puff or go back home and vent. But then when you really think about it, you're like, there's points to be taken out of every conversation. So I think those are some attributes or things that I feel that have benefited me well. And who are somewhat of my character. And I just you just continue. I think every experience builds and adds to your leadership and your job that you're in.
Yeah, I think those are some really good points. And kind of on that note, we had the opportunity to talk to Coach G from Ohio State this year, who I actually got to row for
Nice.
while I was at Ohio State. And so I'm sure both of us could share a lot of stories about that. But one thing that you really said that stuck out to me was that be preparedness piece. And I think that was something that she always hit on in the weight room, and how you can be prepared. But if you're a high school athlete, how can you get better at being prepared and doing those things that you need to do as a leader?
I think sometimes for high school kids, and maybe for younger kids, is more of a mindset. It's thinking that understanding that the things you're doing now are really the foundation for everything that you're going to do when you get older. So your habits, like everything you were doing when we were younger, are habits. And those habits, as we get older, are harder and harder to break. So if you take homework for granted and practice and I don't really need to eat well, or I don't need to go work out, because it's coming easy to you, then those habits aren't there. So when you do hit those pitfalls and challenges, then you just don't know how to respond. So I think it's understanding that the here and now is the here and now, right? Handle this, do the best you can. But there's also that future forward thing that you're wanting to accomplish or see for yourself, and understanding that the habits how I approach my schoolwork, how I approach my relationships with my friends and family, how I approach my sports, it all is interconnected. It is not separate. It does not turn on for one and turn off for another. And I can do this over here and not over here. You are who you are, and it will come out. And it usually will come out when you're challenged or in situations that aren't perfect. And those are the times when leaders and competitors and whatnot rise to the occasion and can handle it. So I think for the younger folks, it's tweaking this and understanding that there's a piece out here, and it really matters how you approach things on a day-to-day and every single thing.
Well, so that's so fitting for where we're at now, because there's so many people looking at what they have and what they have not, what they can do, what they cannot do, all those things. So people are getting stuck in all the things that they don't have anymore or can't do anymore, and not focused on what they can. So with all of your experience on championship teams, where would you tell them to focus right now to get to that level of being a champion when life goes back to normal?
Yeah, so it's for us as coaches, right? We're on this side. We have the draft. We have the WNBA draft tonight. We've been scouting, watching film. We'll start to think about X's and O's with our team and the thought process, right, before we can execute and actually be around our players. So we, as coaches, and that's something most people, is just the workload and the thought process is way different than athletes. It is just the hours and thought is 100 times more than when you were just playing the sport. But for athletes, it's, again, you might not have access to a gym. You don't have the gun that you can get shots up. You don't have a weight room that's got all the rogue stuff and and every machine that you're used to, right? You don't have that. You don't have a rebounder. You don't have all of these things, but you can still run outside. You can still ride your bike. You can still do your cardio and intervals and do workouts you find online. However, whatever your strength and conditioning coaches can send you. You can compete with your team, your teammates or friends, and hey, how many did you do this? You can do body weight stuff. There's so much you can do on your own to stay prepared. And our athletes, I know, are doing that. And we've talked to a lot of the draftees, a lot of the college kids, and they're at home. And some have gyms and some don't. And everybody's making it work and try to do the best you can at the time. And then also keep a positive mindset. But there's also a mental part where I think kids these days get a little burnt out by sports, because whether it's the same sport, whether they're single sport athletes, they're playing during the summer, they're playing club teams, they're playing all of this, that I'm also a believer in a mental break. Sometimes a physical break to a point, right, of maybe your sport, but I think there's always a piece of doing cardio and a baseline of physical activity. But I also think that a mental break of just, like spending time with your family, binge watch a few shows, obviously get a workout in, continue to do some things. But I think there's a piece of having some away time from your team or from your sport to kind of rejuvenate you and want to be back in the gym and practicing and spending hours and having the coach yell at you. I just think there's that break sometimes makes you want it more, and you miss it, and you understand why it is that you love that game, and that when the next time you get on the floor, you're going to be like, man, I can't wait, and I'm going to run through a wall. It's just, I think that helps sometimes.
I think that first piece that you hit on of you can always do something and you can always be continuing to be better kind of leads into something that's always been a big part of any team culture that I've been on, and that's accountability. And so, right now we can't necessarily hold our teammates accountable, or as a coach, you can't necessarily hold your teammates accountable in the gym. So how can you do that as a player or as a coach?
It's hard, right? It's it's hard to make somebody care. It's some people have excuses. Some people, we've all been around teammates or players that it is not their fault. Never will be, never has been. And it is just, there's every reason why they didn't do what you asked or why they're not in shape. And it has nothing to do with them. Right. That's in regular business, anything. And it's really hard to hold people accountable if internally there's not their own somewhat gauge of, I should be doing this. So I think you can push a little. Sometimes if you push too much, some people will just turn you off. I think you start by being the example. I think that's one thing I learned playing wise is that I can't say things to my teammates. I can't demand from my teammates unless I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Doesn't need to be perfect. I'm still going to make mistakes, but I have to minimal. I'm not the one doing it every time, even though the coach told us 10 times, right? I have to hold myself to this standard. Then I can say, boom, right? I can say X, Y, and Z because I'm doing the work. I'm both mentally, physically being locked in. So I think that is lead by example and not say you need to do this, right? Like we need to. And then it's finding the trigger, right? What motivates them? Why does it matter? And it's really hard. It's something that even on the coaching side probably dealt with more is how do you motivate each one and figure out how it benefits them? Because at the end of the day, right now, what we deal with is everybody wants to know what you can do for them, not what they can do for you. And it's hard because if they're not innately wired like that, or if your majority of your team is not wired like that, then it's easier to go into these little pockets. But if the majority of your team is like, we're doing our work, we're on time, or coach says this, then it's easier to translate our message to them and then have it disseminate through everybody else. So I guess my first thing would be like, do it yourself first before you start, throwing stones and you, and make it a we, not a you aren't doing this or you need to do this, but hey, this will help us, boom, 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 will help us down the road. And then ultimately, if people don't buy in, when the season starts back up, when practices start back up, guess what? If you didn't put in the work, the coach knows, and ultimately it'll affect probably your playing time or the ability to compete. And it also will affect your character and your reputation because every day is a job interview. Because I coach now, the coaches I played for have hired me. So every day of how I approached my job as a player ultimately has impacted my jobs and the ability to my reputation and how I work and how I do things and how I interact with people matters.
That's a great point you just made about how your previous coaches have hired you. When you have players that are at your level, athletes that are at your level, one of the things that we are seeing is that they are highly coachable. So you got yourself, like Michael Phelps, the relationship he had with his coach is amazing. And I always point that out to students that if you've got elite athletes like that look to their coach and are that coachable, why are you better than them? So could you talk a little bit about being coachable? Because I got to imagine that to get to your level, you've had some great coaches and been coachable.
Yeah, and it's partly, again, innately who we are. Like I just, in school, I was valedictorian, I was co-valedictorian. My parents kind of instilled if you're going to do something, do it the best you can. Whether it's cutting the grass, don't have somebody come back around and have to trim up the whole yard because you just did, you know what I mean? If you're going to do it, do it to a level that it matters and it's the best you can do, so that people aren't, that when I say I cut the grass, you don't have to come out and check and say, oh, okay, you just, did it, a half job. So I think they instilled that. And then it was wanting to be good at what I did. I wanted to hone in on my skills. I put in the work. You didn't have to remind me twice to get myself outside, to get shots up, to work on my ball handling, to get to the gym, to jump rope, whatever it was. Now, please believe some of your most elite athletes are some of your most competitive. And there is that fire that, you might make faces, or you might, get a little testy when coaches are telling you to do something. But most of the time, it's just the reaction because you care so much. And you have to be careful of how you do that. But I like players that have a fire. Now, where's the fire originating from, right? Is it coming from a place of selfishness, or is it coming from a place of, I want to win and I want to do what I can for the team? Is it ultimately about the team? So it's kind of like, what's the origin of it? Like, right? There's two different fires sometimes. There's one that's more selfish and it's just about me. And there's another fire that you can work with, right? And you want it because they're about the team and they're about really getting better. So I think it's listening. It's getting out of the heat of the moment, because all of you guys playing sports, when you're in it, like, you care so much and you have invested so much time. It matters so much. This is an emotional thing. This is not, if you have players that aren't emotional or athletes that aren't emotional, then it's kind of like, what are we doing here? Right. You know what I mean? Because it is like, you're giving so much of your body and your time. So there's an emotional reaction, but I think there's also, you have to step back and understand, okay, how do I continue to improve? How do you take the things from those coaches and implement them? And so I think it's, that sometimes you have the reaction, but I think it's mostly of the listening. And at the end of the day, you just have to remind yourself is that you don't know it all, and you're not good at everything, and that people have their view of things and how they see things. It's great to have those perspectives. So I think it's just a wanting to be better, and then the openness to continue to learn and understand that you just really don't know it all.
Yeah, I think that's great. And one of the things that you hit on there was being a competitor. And one of the biggest things that we talk about all the time at Titan when we're working with teams or athletes is to be a fierce competitor. And at the high school level, a lot of times, there's one or two at a school, and then you get to college and there's a lot more. And I'm sure by the time you're in the WNBA, everybody's a fierce competitor. So how do you kind of keep that edge and keep being competitive, as well as bring your teammates up to that level? Because you've always been known to have that.
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? Because it's like, okay, what's your motivation? All right, it's the hunger, and in high school, it's, I wanted to win in both our leagues and possibly state, but then there was the goal of college, right? And then, all right, I still want to perform there, and then it was USA basketball, and then it was in the pros. But I played 17 years in the pros, and retired when I was 39. And my motivation, it's that self-talk. it's either having a chip for a reason, or creating a chip or a underdog scenario in your mind. It's me being older, and you have 21-year-olds coming in the league, and the fear of being embarrassed and having them run circles around you. There's fear mode. There's all these motivations that continue to make you hungry to get out of bed, to all the aches and pains and the surgeries that you've had. You're like, I'm still going to do it. I'm getting up. I'm going to do it. I am not going to either be, these young bucks aren't going to get my job. I still need to prove that this game, the respect for the game that I have, of not cheating the game and making sure that you're approaching it and giving it what it deserves. And then your teammates, at the end of the day, having respect for them, and your employer. At the end of the day, it's also you're getting paid. So there's all these levels of things you can draw on to help you stay with it, even when the days are like, man, practice again. Like, man, I just wish we could play games. It's just, it happens. So then you have to play these. Sometimes it's just like a game to yourself of, what is it that kind of makes me like, all right, I'm going to do this workout, this 30-minute bike interval as hard as I can. I have to do it better than yesterday, right? I mean, that's not easy to do every day. So I think those are some things that have gone in my mind. And I think it's different from everybody, their motivation. But I do think there's these little mind games that you play with yourself that ultimately kind of keep you hungry and keep you motivated.
That's great. It sounds like that's right in line with the next question we had. And with all the championship teams you've had and all your success, how do you keep at the top? How do you stay at that elite level for as many years as you have? Can you talk to that?
Yeah, it's part of it's your group, right? It's when you have teams, like some of the best teams I was on, it was, and you just know it, right? You have a feel. There's something about a group when it comes together. And sometimes you have no clue when you first, have this team and the year starts, but it starts to snowball, and ultimately it's the team first, right? There is an ultimate sacrifice of take care of each other, and there's no excuses. Like when there's a game plan and coach is saying we're guarding this way, and somebody messes up, we don't just stop and say, well, she didn't do her job. No, I mean, it might not have been my help. It might not have been my job to do what it is, but I did it anyways. And then I'm going to say, hey, yo, you have to do this next time. Like, come on, you got it. Right. But I didn't leave, and somebody didn't leave me hanging. It wasn't like I'm trying to just show like, she didn't do her job. See, this is why, you know what I mean? It's that I've had teams like that where nothing works. It's literally, it's not my fault. It's their fault. Da, 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 and it doesn't work because it's not perfect. Playing sports, being a competitor, it is not perfect. You have a game plan, you have things you want to do. It has its own life. So you on the fly have to do things and make decisions and ultimately have your teammates back. And it might not be the correct thing, but I'm just not going to let it happen. I'm going to make sure that they're taken care of. But then we may talk about it. Hey, you got to do this, this, and this. And that's my hold them accountable piece. So it's really just finding a way, and at the end of the day, caring for each of them, and finding ways. And it might not be your best friend, but I think you have to like and care about them in some way. Something about them you really enjoy and have a bond with. And then at the end of the day, it's staying hungry. So we didn't win we've done the back-to-back in the Columbus Quest, and then we went to 3 straight finals with Detroit. And I don't know what it was. I don't know. We just tried to play the underdog role, and we stayed and pushed each other in practice. But it was individually, we just had we loved the game and we loved to play together. So it just was kind of an inner competitiveness that we had, along with our coaches kind of fostering it, and just the consistency piece. Like some days we might not have been emotionally geeked up and high and just you know what I mean, but I'm still going to do my job and make sure that we're here, right, the whole time. So that means we're still good. It's even when it gets a little bit monotonous, but you're still doing it at this level. And that's a respect for yourself, your coaches, your teammates, is to show up and be consistent, and do your job. Like at the end of the day, it truly is about doing your job. that is it. Like it's nothing else other than do your job as well as you can, show up for your teammates, and then go keep going and trying to figure out how you can win the thing.
I think that's kind of a good point to go into what I was most excited to talk to you about today, and that's with the WNBA Draft happening tonight. I personally think one of the greatest athletes of my generation is probably going to get drafted first tonight. I'm super excited to watch the draft. And I think from your perspective, I want to know, what do you look for in team leaders and people that you're going to draft?
Yeah. And it matters. So we look at, obviously, all these players have a skill set, right? They're solid athletes. Yes, she might be too small for a post player. And you're thinking all right, how do they translate physically? And, can they shoot it well enough? Blah, blah, blah. Of course you have all of that. But honestly, the separator between a group of similar talent, it is their motor. It is their passion. It is the not having to bring it out of them. It is their competitive drive. I remember one of my coaches, and they basically said back in the day, I played a long time ago, that you didn't have to really recruit or scout for effort. You did. Effort was just right. Effort was always there. But today, I think what we see is that is not the case. Like having a motor, bringing energy, and competing the whole game is something you actually look for, and is something that you're finding out in players. So the communication piece, a personality, is also good as long as it's a positive personality. Again, we have one of my coaches back in the, they said, or you're either a light bulb or you're a light sucker. Like you're either one or the other. You're either brighten it up for everybody or you are just stealing the life out of people. And I do believe there's something to do with that. Some people with strong personalities can use it for evil, basically, and can draw people away when things aren't going their way or somebody's moaning and groaning. They can start to co-sign that. Or you have personalities that show up every day, whether they play a minute and are getting workouts in or pumping everybody up. So I think, you look for those and we do our due diligence and try to talk to coaches and anybody in their circle to get a vibe of who they are. It isn't necessarily their skill set. We know that. We want to know who they are and what is that why does basketball matter? Why do they want to continue to do it? Is it just a job or is it really that they're hungry to become the best they can? So we look for that competitive spirit. We call it a motor. Like we cannot coach playing hard or wanting to compete or wanting to show up every day and go through the grind. We just cannot coach that.
Yeah, great point. That's one thing that every player, every athlete does control. That they can't blame that on anybody else. The motor, their effort, that's on them.
Yeah.
So with being a coach in the WNBA now, what is your favorite aspect of being a coach?
My favorite aspect is honestly working with the coaches and working with the players. It's still that, oh man, it feels so good to go to the gym and you walk in and you're hello and just spending that time preparing, watching film in the gym, practices, and then the camaraderie that you have. I mean, they really are. The relationships are the one thing I from my whole career. One of the highlights of it all has been my relationships with everyone involved, from both my teammates, coaches, and then the support staff and just the people that you've met along the way. So I think that's the one piece I continue to love. I do love the prep. I do love the trying to figure out how you use your pieces to compete and find ways to win, and just what to tweak, what not to. But I really love our staff. Now I'm in Minnesota, just the way we work together and bounce things off each other. It's a lot of fun to still have that camaraderie and that team in both the coaching world and our group. And then also our team includes players, coaches, everything. And we have a common goal. So I love that, but it's also a lot harder than playing. As a player, you could impact the game much more easily. I was on the floor, hands-on, things I did, things I saw, immediate. I could fix it. I could get somebody to do something. I could, create. It was so much easier. Now you're like removed and you have to vocalize it or prepare and do the drill and show them. And then you may have said it too loudly, you may have yelled and that didn't register and then you didn't say it. So it's a lot harder now to facilitate and really change things. And you really have to be smart and calculated about who you have on your team, how's your team made up, how do you teach them, how do they learn, and then also how to get better. It's a challenge. It's a lot of fun, but it's definitely a lot harder on this level. And then the layers to everything. Being a coach, there are a lot more layers and a lot more things that as players, if we're doing our job right, nothing about. And there's layers of good and there's layers of bad. And there's things that coaches and administration are dealing with that their hands are tied. Sometimes but that life goes on. You still have to find a way to do your job and try to have success. So that's also another piece that kind of got thrown into, especially in New York with Team Up for Sale and all these things, that there are a lot of layers to this and a lot of things you can't control, but you still got to find a way to figure it all out. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that's okay. And anybody who's in coaching, and that's the nature of the beast. It's just, sometimes it's good fit and sometimes it's not. And sometimes but you keep learning and growing from every chance and every experience.
I can remember I think it was 2018 when you got inducted to the Hall of Fame. Coach D had went with you, and then she came back and came into our locker room right before we were getting ready to lift and had us all sit down and watch your Hall of Fame speech. And one of the things I took from that, and I'm kind of curious to learn a little bit more about, is you talked a lot about investment and investing in the sport and what you did as an athlete. But can you go a little more into what that investment is like as a coach with your athletes and with the game?
Yeah, it's just like anything. Like, I mean, you just have to put in the time. I mean, I know it's kind of cliche, like you have to work hard. But anybody that's had success or is, or having success works hard. Like, it's not easy. It doesn't just happen. You're making sacrifices, and you're doing things that other people aren't, and that's why you're in the position you are. Um, as a coach, I think it's even more so. Like, I think players, we get rewarded for the sacrifices a little bit more. You get the scholarship, you get this. I think as coaches, it really, if it goes well and you've done your job, I mean, your players are going to be the king, right? They don't know the hours at the sleepless nights. They don't know the fires that you put out, the conversations over here. But it's worth it, right? It's worth it to have a piece of work and to be a part of something that is well run, that has a group or an organization that has high character, that you have a culture. I know culture is kind of just a buzzword in a sense, but how do you build that culture? What do you allow? What do you not allow? One piece of advice, somebody told me was, you're either coaching it or allowing it, right? You're either coaching it or allowing it. And you catch yourself, even during my coaching career, you say, man, and you try to figure out what you can bend on and what you don't, right? And that's also hard. But then there's another piece is trusting yourself. Like, at the end of the day, trusting that what a championship team looks like, how teammates treat each other, how you go about practice, and trusting yourself and make decisions accordingly, that this isn't right. And standing up, even when it might not be the popular view, and it could be a lot of heat. Is, I think, the trust factor of trusting your gut and trusting that this is how you should do things is another piece for coaches. Because it's easy to be like, oh, well, we can maybe get away with this or do this. Like, you start to bend a little too much on things that, deep down, that's not how championship teams and successful businesses, anything, manage or are going to function.
Yeah, great point. And I got a question from a viewer that's pretty good here. Who was your biggest rival as a player?
I had a couple. Diana was one. Diana Taurasi. Her and I love playing against DT, and then Tamika Catchings was probably another. And biggest, because I love playing defense. Like, I could score, but Brian Agler, one of my coaches, got me to fall in love with defense. And it made me feel so even better than scoring when I could shut down people and make their life, tough. So DT was hard. I always thought the best matchups were those that are physical, like big, like DT 6 foot, catching 6'2". They can shoot it from the outside. They can drive it. They have all the skill set, right? And so you have to be on your toes at all times. So those two, it was a battle. And Catch, she's getting into the Hall of Fame this year. She was just, especially when we played at Indiana, like, every once in a while you have the gamemanship of, flopping a little bit. I mean, and so she would, fall really hard. And I actually didn't do anything. And I'd get called for a foul, and the fans would just boo me and boo me and boo me. And I was just like, I didn't do anything. She's going to hurt herself. But those two, because of they're competitive, big shots, could do a little bit of everything, have the physicality. I loved it. And DT we would chat a little bit during the game, but mostly in a fun way. But DT, I don't think, guarded me very often. So that wasn't we're not equal on that part.
What I think was fun about that whole thing is, out of all the questions, you lit up when we talked about your rifle.
Yeah, you miss, part of me, I don't miss playing. Like, I got every ounce of playing out of my body, and it's funny because, people ask you, what's your dream job? Well, I kind of had it. Like, it's kind of hard now. Like, I'm like, pivoting and trying to figure out. Coaching is amazing, But playing basketball was like, I mean, he really didn't have to pay me. I could sit in a gym at Larkin's back in the day, and now at the Arc, and when I was still playing, and man, I could sit there all day. I could sit there for hours. Part of it's social, part of it's playing. It's just the camaraderie again in the game and the fun that you have. But just a lot of good memories and good people too, and continue to watch, Diana as she's trying to keep that body together for a few more.
Yeah, I think kind of going off of that question, my question is, you guys are kind of on this elite women's coaching staff. Like it's kind of gone around ESPN and everybody that you guys are this elite women's group of coaches right now. And everyone's talking about it. Like, what's that like to be with that group of women, especially as a young woman in athletics trying to move my way up? Like, what's that like?
Yeah, so being with Cheryl Reeve, who's the head coach of Minnesota, and Cheryl coached me in Detroit. She was an assistant. And even what Muffet said back a couple of years ago I don't know if it was at the Final Four, and again, I've had a lot of male. Bill Lambier gave me my first head in my job, coaching job. He's been one of my best coaches. Brian Agler. I mean, I have there's so many great people, male, female, in the game who have given to the women's game. But there's just there's something to be said about bringing us along and making sure that we know who wants to coach. And that's also another thing. When I was trying to put my staff together, one of the hardest part is understanding which former players want to coach, who from the college ranks would like to coach in the WNBA, what former players are actually wanting to coach. Can we give them a video job? So part of it is the network or database that you have. And Cheryl's talked about this, of creating that, where that coaches now can look and see who's where, who wants to, and really having that network. And she said, I want an all woman staff. She's had two male assistants that have gotten head jobs on very limited experience, especially one. And I know there's a ton of women's basketball players that have that much experience. And not to say it doesn't deserve it, whatever. It's just the opportunities need to. And I think I value that some of them are my former teammates, and it's just that we know what we're doing, and to continue to give to each other, to continue to learn, and for me to share what I know with our staff, for me to share what I know to other coaches around both college and not, and being open. I think that men do that really well, and good coaches is they share, right? And this is what you're doing right now. You're sharing about leadership. You're sharing about coaching. And that's all this is, right? Just we share and steal information and try to take it back and make it our own. So I'm very proud of it. I think there is a disparity. There's disparity in money in all occupations, but we need to continue to do our part and make sure that opportunities are given to those and try to help people along the way.
So the next question then, can you go, it's actually from a viewer, what has been the biggest challenge for you as a coach? So can you go into what your biggest challenge was and how you've handled it?
Biggest challenge, I've had a lot. I think it's just, first of all, hiring a staff is hard. I think hiring people in general for jobs and to work with you or under, I think that's a very hard thing to do, because who you work and have surrounding you and in your circle is a important thing. And just like having the right group of people on a team is important, right? You have to have the right balance of strong personalities, those that just, can handle not playing. So I think hiring people first and foremost is a really tough job. Knowing who's out there, but also digging deep on who they are, really, not the interview person, but the who you really are going to get. Trusting your staff and trusting the people you're working with is also another key component. But the coaching piece, it's finding, it's how to recognize what your team needs teaching wise, like what works for them, like, right. And I'm every day after a game or something, we would always be like, well, that must not have worked. Like, you know what I mean? But you don't want to change too much. You want to be consistent as well, but you also want to make sure that are we watching film enough? Are we watching individual film? So it's really the daily thought process of how can I help this individually, each person. And it is, the time commitment is tough. Our staffs aren't huge when in the WNBA, so there's, you're already scouting and prepping and doing edits and prepping for, but then you want to do individual work and have those relationships with people. The other part is just managing personalities. And when the season is so short, and then also you need certain people to win games, and how much do you put your foot down and completely rock the boat. And it's that fine line of how to, when to bend and when not to. And that was tricky. We had an interesting dynamics. And then also we were up for sale for a year and a half, played in a small county center, then got bought, played in some, St. Joseph's as a practice facility. Just the transition and the adaptability, and trying to keep it as normal for them. But we're over here scrambling and dealing with stuff left and right just to put out fires. And just, so that type of stuff was tricky. There's a lot to be thrown on us. But again, I think you learn from it, and you just try to do the best you can. I thought we did a pretty good job for what we were kind of thrown. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to lead us into kind of one of my favorite questions to ask anybody that we have on. Every team has these traits and behaviors that allow them to be a championship team. And, you're a Hall of Famer, won gold medals, been with the best of the best. What are those traits and behaviors that you've seen consistently?
Yeah, it's obviously it's a drive, right? There is an inner drive from the best. I mean, there's just no question about it. When we're on the Olympic team, there isn't one person that's like, why are we doing this workout? What do we, I don't need, everybody's doing extra cardio if they didn't play. So there's just a professionalism, that this is your job and this is the level that I'm going to do it. There's an understanding of it's bigger. It's really not about you at some point. At the end, whenever I was playing and I get a little bit, it's just everything get a little yucky and messy, and you start getting in your own head. My biggest thing would be just like, all right, let me just go run. Let me go guard somebody. Let me set a screen. But I stopped thinking about scoring. I stopped thinking about like me. I started to think about what I could do for my team or for somebody else. And then once you kind of get that mindset, like things just start to happen. And I really, at the end of the day, you really learn about life and then about your team, is that at the end of the day, it's really not about you. Like, just do your job. And another thing we try to tell our players is team success will ultimately equal individual success. It will. If your team doesn't win, does not matter. There is something hanging over your head and saying, oh, she scored 25 points a game, but their team didn't win. So what is it? What is that? Where's the disconnect? And I always tell, there's players in the WNBA, as us as coaches, we'll take the 12th man off a bench who came from a championship team for a culture, for a fit, for a locker room person, and we'll pay them money. Even obviously they can play a little bit, but they're not going to play. But we brought them because of their personality and because of their culture and character. And honestly, that's worth, money for us. That's worth a scholarship for others. Like, there's a place for that. And as I said, the team first. But our best teams, again, there's that competitive fire from all of them. At the end of the day, you don't make excuses. You don't point fingers. You find a way to get it done. And it could, later you can moan and groan and talk about such and such, like she can't guard anybody and we always have to help her. But at the end of the day, it's literally you take care of each other, and there aren't excuses that coaches didn't tell us, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. You talk about it, laugh at it later, but during the heat of the moment, you're going to find a way to get it done. That is bottom line.
Great. I think one last question. If you were to talk to high school Katie Smith today, what piece of advice would you give her to help her to even make the journey better, to do whatever to improve. But what advice would you give yourself if you were talking to yourself in high school?
Oh yeah. I think part of it is being a little bit more. I was really driven, right? I mean, I would go get my workouts in, and for a long time it was just like I could care less what anybody else was doing. It was like I gotta get this in. Like this is what I want to do. I think part of me is would have liked to hang out and gotten to know my teammates even more during like my college days. I got better at it as I got into the pros. And of course you have a little bit more time to hang out, but I got better as I got older. I think, initially at Ohio State and everything, I probably could have done a better job just getting to know everything and spending time and having those, we have bonds, but even better. I was just school basketball, like just, this is what I got to do. So I think those relationships ultimately help you have more success, and that common, bond goal and people wanting to lay it on the line for each other. So I think there's a little bit of that leader part of the personal and the opportunity to hang out together. And when people ask you to hang out, you say yes. You know what I mean? And like sometimes you just get lazy and you're like, nah, I don't want to go. But I think investing in those people and spending more time just away from the practice time and the things that you had to do, anyways. So I think I probably would have liked to have done that earlier. Is like, hey, loosen up a little bit and spend time, because that stuff matters. But it's, and even now with the players, like as a coach, like some of them need a lot of attention and checking in. Others don't. I know personally, I don't. Like I could not talk to my coach all off season. I know they're good and I'm good, and all right, I'll see you when I see you. So it's understanding that people aren't you, right? So understanding even earlier that how I'm wired, something that doesn't bother me at all could be something major for somebody else. So again, just kind of those learning curves of just not being so like tunnel vision, and it just opening up a little bit, and a lot of lessons you learn. But I think the part of it is the investment piece away from the day-to-day practice and the times that you're required to be together, would be just being more like, sure, I'll go, instead of being like, I'm tired or I got to study or whatever. But that would be probably the one thing I'd say is just loosen up a little bit, but still do your job.
Coach, thank you so much. I know this is a busy day for you. You got the draft tonight, so much going on. So we appreciate your time so much. And the great thing is that there's going to be thousands of people watch this, and will gain from it, build themselves as leaders, and we'll take their game to the next level, and maybe build some of those coaches that you're talking about. So it's exciting to see that you're investing what you've learned into the next generation. So thank you so much for doing this. And I'll hand it over to Madison to close us out when she takes it off mute.
Thank you again for joining us. I'm sure everybody learned a lot. I know as a young coach, I definitely took a lot from this. And it was really an honor to be able to talk to you today, especially from all the stories I've heard at Ohio State. So a lot of great things that I think anybody can take from it. You can always come back and rewatch this. Anybody's watching it right now and take even more notes. You can get more information on the Titan Leader app. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram, as well as go ahead and message us if you have any questions about anything. We're here to help, and we want everybody to become a better leader. We know how much leadership matters to everyone. And as we all continue to grow on this leadership journey, we hope that you join us. Thank you again for joining us on Titan Leader. Have a great day, everyone.